Hotel, family. Welcome back to Matthew Daniels TV. I am your host, the greatest author alive. Y'all know who it is, the real bookworm. I'm doing the book game like it ain't never been done before, and I'm doing the book game like it ain't probably never be done again. You guys see the title. Today, I'm going to be bringing you guys the story, the true story of the Hoodoo Priestess who lived in a tree. That's right. We're going to be talking about the Hoodoo Priestess who lived in a tree. Now, let me get my PowerPoint pulled up. I want to make sure that my share screen is working, and I want to make sure that my audio is working. And we're going to get off into this story. This is a very, very interesting tale. I'm telling you, man, you guys are going to love this one. You guys are going to love this one. All right, give me just a second. Let me verify that I have everything working, the audio, the screen share. Verify that I have everything. Okay, cool. Now today we're going to be talking about one of the ancestors who is affectionately known as Aunt Dorcas. Aunt Dorcas. Now, Aunt Dorcas is an ancestor who was born around 1814. She was born during the time of slavery, and we don't know much about her life during slavery, but we know that at some point, based on the information available, we know that at some point she was able to escape slavery and hide out in the swamps of Georgia. And she was able to hide out in the swamps of Georgia until after the Civil War. And she made her home inside of a hollow tree. Now, this oak tree was still alive. The branches were still alive when she was living inside of this tree, but she made her home. She made her hideout inside of a hollowed out tree. And she basically lived there until her death. Now, Aunt Dorcas is a bona fide Hoodoo priestess that we have verified information from. One thing that I always tell people that we have to understand is that during the time of our enslavement and immediately after, it was the practitioners of Hoodoo that serviced our communities. They did a great service to our community, and the service that they did for our ancestors and for our communities has been hidden from us. And not so much as hidden because we can find it, it has not been talked about. And anytime that it is talked about, it is spoken about with negative connotations. It is spoken of as devil worship, demon worship, witchcraft, superstition, the fake beliefs of the quote unquote Negroes. So I like to bring you guys these tales to show you the reality. So today I'm going to be bringing back to life the story of ancestor Aunt Dorcas, who was born around 1814. And she is the Hoodoo priestess who lived in a tree since the time of slavery. And I'm going to make all of this make sense. Now, our primary source for this information is coming from the Weekly Telegraph newspaper. If you look on your screen, this is a newspaper that was produced in Macon, Georgia. So we're looking at the state of Georgia. And this story was published on a Thursday, February the 8th, 1894. So this story was published well over 100 years ago. Look what it says from the headlines. Hollow home of hoary hoodoo, a place held sacred by the superstitious Negroes of the neighborhood. Doings of old Aunt Dorcas. How she lives on reptiles and insects in a hollow tree, makes conjure bags and strange nostrums for the colored folks, said to have large savings. We're going to break all of this down and we're going to make all of this make sense. So let's get into the story. Let's get into the article And at various points, I'm going to break this information down for you. Hold on just a second. Okay, here we go. Let me get the slideshow. All right, so we're going to read through this article, and as usual, I'm going to be teaching as I go. So this is what they say about Aunt Dorcas. By far, the queerest human being in Bibb County is an old Negro woman who lives in a tree about 2 miles from Reed Station in the southern portion of the county, 7 or 8 miles from Macon, Georgia. So let's stop right there. I want to show you guys exactly the area that they're talking about where ancestor Aunt Dorcas lives. So they give us a few clues. They tell us that she lives in a tree about 2 miles from Reed Station, and she is living in Bibb County. Now, as we go a little bit further, they're going to say that the tree that she is living in is on the edge of a swamp. So watch this here, family. I want to bring you guys exactly where she's living. So let's look at the history of Bibb County. First of all, where is Bibb County? Bibb County is in Georgia. So if you look on your screen, we have a map of the United States of America. In red, we have the state of Georgia. So this is the state where Aunt Dorcas lived. Now remember, a lot of the hoodoo practitioners, they lived in the South. In the practice of hoodoo, the religion of hoodoo, the spiritual traditions of hoodoo went from the South to the North during what is known as the Great Migration. After the end of the Civil War, a lot of our ancestors from the South began to move to the North because the North was more progressive. It was more acceptable to the Negro population, the African American population. And so a lot of our ancestors moved there. But the hub, the central location for hoodoo that our ancestors brought from the shores of Africa to the shores of America with them was centered in the South. Now, where in Georgia is Bibb County? If you look on the map, I just scrolled up a little bit. We see that Bibb County Courthouse in Macon. We see the red geographical region. That's Bibb County. So Bibb County is somewhat in the middle towards the southern region of the state of Georgia. So our story today is happening in the southern portion of the United States, in the mid to mid-south region of the state of Georgia, in a place called Bibb County. Now, let's read a little bit about the history of Bibb County, just so we'll have some context to the story. This area of Bibb County was inhabited for thousands of years by successive indigenous peoples. The Ocmulgee National Monument is a national park and historic site incorporating 2 major mound and town complexes. The Moore Mounds and Village Site and Ocmulgee Mound Site, both located along the Ocmulgee River. They were built by indigenous peoples during the Mississippian culture era. The detailed chronicles of the Hernando de Soto expedition recorded visiting Ikchisi, a major village, in 1539. Historians and archaeologists have theorized it may have been located at the Lamar Mounds complex. Now, we all are aware that every location in what we're calling the United States was previously inhabited by indigenous peoples, Native Americans, quote unquote Indians. So all of the histories of these lands begin like this, before the land was stolen from the natives. Look, for centuries. The historic Native Americans, Muskogee tribe, descendants of this culture, was the predominant one in a large area of Georgia, including that later organized as Bibb County. During the colonial period is briefly, whenever they say the colonial period, they're talking about prior to 1776 when the United States declared their independence from Great Britain. The colonial period is when we had 13 colonies, and these 13 colonies were ruled by empires on the continent of Europe. So when they say during the colonial period, they're talking about the time period in history prior to 1776. During the colonial period, Anglo colonists carried on a brisk trade with them and allied with them in certain wars in the Southeast. With European American land hunger to extend cotton cultivation in the Georgia uplands, the Muskogee and other forced civilized tribes of the Southeast were forcibly relocated to Indian territory west of the Mississippi River in the Indian removal of the 1830s. During the administration of President Andrew Jackson, the Indian tribes affected referred to their journey as the Trail of Tears, since many died during the march west. We all know about the Trail of Tears, and some of those quote-unquote civilized tribes had some of our ancestors enslaved, and some of our ancestors were enslaved, and they were taken on this Trail of Tears as well. In the late 18th century, the cotton gin was invented, making profitable the process of short staple cotton. This could be grown across the uplands of the South, in the contrast to the low staple cotton of the Low Country. Bibb is considered one of the counties of the Black Belt, which originally referred to the fertile dark soil in these uplands. The area was developed by European American planters who used enslaved African Americans as workers to clear land and develop large cotton plantations during the antebellum years. Cotton generated high profits since it was in demand in the textile mills of the northern states and England. By the 1860 census, shortly before the American Civil War, more than 1 million enslaved African Americans lived in Georgia, and they constituted a majority of the population in much of the Black Belt. So this would have been the scene that Aunt Dorcas Aunt Dorcas was raised in. Okay, now again, we don't know what year she escaped, but I'm going to show you the evidence that she actually escaped prior to the Civil War. We're going to get into that as we move further. Bibb County was created by act of the Georgia legislature on December 9th, 1822, with Macomb, remember that name, Bibb County, Macomb, Georgia, to be incorporated as a town city in December 1823, designated the county seat. It was carved from the earlier territories of the counties of Jones, Monroe, Houston, and Twiggs counties. The county seat has not been changed since, and no other subsequent county in the state has ever been created or erected out of land from Bibb County. So we see immediately, just like every other area in the South, Bibb County in the state of Georgia was prime real estate for hoodoo. Why? You had a mixture of Europeans, Africans, and Native Americans all in that area until the 1830s, when the Trail of Tears took place and they displaced all of the natives. Now, Aunt Dorcas was born in 1814. So when she was born, there were still Native Americans in that area. Now, we don't know 100% where she was born. I'll put that out there. We don't have the records. We don't know where exactly she was born, but we just have to assume it was somewhere in this general area. That's what we're going to assume moving forward. And when I tell you guys about hoodoo, the important thing to remember about hoodoo is that the religion or the spiritual system or the culture, the practices of hoodoo is a mixture of multiple cultures and spirituality and practices. It's a mix of African traditions and African spirituality, a mix of native traditions and native spirituality, and also a mixture of European religion and culture and spirituality. It's like a melting pot. It took a little bit from here, a little bit from there, and a little bit from over here. Because remember, one of the major things about the hoodoo practitioner, and one thing that we're going to see about Aunt Dorcas, is that the hoodoo practitioner also provided and created the medicine that healed our ancestors during slavery. Now, their medicine was made from the land, the plants, the herbs, the roots, the animals. They used these things to create medicine. It was not all magic. But the ecology, the ecosystem in Georgia is different from the ecology or the ecosystem in Africa. There's different plants, there's different trees, there's different animals, there's different roots, there's different herbs. So our ancestors learned from the natives, from the indigenous people about certain plants, and they learned through trial and error. And they learned some things from the Europeans. And they utilized this information about what plant could heal what, and they incorporated that into what we're calling hoodoo. So that's the history of Bibb County. This is where we are at in Georgia. This is where our story actually takes place. So let's go a little further with the story, family. Okay. I just wanted to make this make sense. Look, the only name the woman has ever been known to have is Aunt Dorcas. And it's interesting that even today, in the African American communities, we refer to the older generation as auntie and unc. Like me, I'm 42 years old. The youngsters all call me unc. And the females that are my age, they call them aunt or auntie. Auntie, aunt, auntie, aunt, unc. We all say it. I'm sure if you're on social media, you've heard these terms being used as well. Well, that's not new slang. That's not new slang. That is an echo of what our ancestors used to say. So when the individual was calling somebody aunt or unc or uncle back in the day, yes, they were referring to them as someone who was older, someone who was an elder. And so today, when we use that terminology, we're not using new terminology, we're using ancient terminology that's hundreds of years old in our culture. Look, the only name the woman has ever been known to have is Aunt Dorcas. And the few people with whom she talks never address her in any other way. Aunt Dorcas is about 80 years of age and has been living in the tree as far back as the oldest settlers in that part of the county can remember. Why is that important? So she's living in a tree and they're going to describe the tree here in a second, but pay attention. They say that she's about 80 years old. And sometimes this is how you have to do research. You have to read the facts and piece together the information. When is this story written? Thursday, February the 8th, 1894. So if she is around 80 years old in 1894, then when was she born? Obviously, we subtract 80 from 1894 and we get that the year of 1814. So if she's 80 in 1894, she was born in 1814, and she was born well before the Civil War, which ended in around 1865. She would have been around 50 years old when the Civil War ended. A grown woman, meaning she would have grew up during the time of slavery. But remember, I'm proposing that she escaped slavery. And that's how she came to live in the tree. And I'm going to prove that with some of the evidence that's coming up. But I wanted to stop and show you guys that so I can show you guys where I'm getting the idea of her birth year from, 1814. And this is the first clue. Look, they say that she has been living in the tree as far back as the oldest settlers in that part of the county can remember. So the oldest people that has settled in Bibb County, those people are saying, hey, as long as we've been here, she's been living in that tree. They settled the land before the Civil War. Again, they settled the land before the Civil War. So if she's been there as long as the oldest settlers have been there, she's been living in that tree since prior to the Civil War. Now, one thing you have to understand is a lot of times when our ancestors got free or escaped the freedom, yes, a lot of them escaped on what we're calling the Underground Railroad, and what our ancestors called the Underground Railroad, and they escaped to the north. But all of our ancestors didn't escape to the north. Quite often, when an individual would run from a plantation or escape from a plantation, they would run off into the woods. They would run off into the swamps. And because the land wasn't as developed as it is now. And so they would live in these woods and they would live in these swamps for years. Sometimes they would live in these swamps for 10, 20 years before they could actually make it to the north. Sometimes they would live in these woods and they would live in these swamps for 10, 20 years, 5 years, and then end up going back to the plantation. Sometimes they would live in these woods and live in these swamps until they passed away. There are several stories of our ancestors escaping from the plantation, going into the woods, going into the swamps, and living in a cave, living up a tree, living inside of a hollowed out tree, or living inside of a dead tree that has fallen down but has left a nice sized stump which is hollowed out, where our ancestors could climb inside of that stump and make a home for themselves inside of the stump. This is not to those who know, this is not the only instance of one of our ancestors living in a tree. So we understand the history. If she has been living in this tree since before the Civil War, I'm 99% sure she escaped from the plantation, didn't make it on the Underground Railroad all the way up to the north, and she just hid out in the wooded area, hid out in the swamps, and she found a tree that was hollowed out, and she made her home inside of that tree. And she lived there for so long that even after the Civil War took place and our ancestors gained their freedom, she continued to live inside of the tree because that's what she knew. That's what she knew. Look, Where she came from, no one but herself knows, and the few who know her well enough do not dare ask her. So she never offered up the information to anyone about where she came from. Again, that lends credibility to the theory that she escaped. She may not want to say, I escaped from so and so plantation, for fear that she may still be punished for escaping. Look, judging from her appearance, Aunt Dorcas would not weigh over 90 pounds, and her little, old, dried up form is misshapen, while her face looks more like the physiognomy of a gorilla than that of a human being. Her eyes are set so far back in her head that they can hardly be seen except by close scrutiny. They are as bright as diamonds, however, and greatly resemble those of a snake. Perhaps the most hideous part of the old woman are her hands, which look like the claws of a wild beast. The fingernails are nearly an inch in length and are as hard and sharp as a knife blade. She has never been known to wear shoes, and her clothing is nothing but rags she has gathered at odd times. The tree in which Aunt Dorcas lives is an unusually large white oak, the branches of which are still alive, but hollow at the base. The tree is about 5 feet in diameter, and the hollow is about 3.5 feet in diameter. So we see that she's living inside of a tree. It's hollowed out. The tree is still alive, the branches are still alive, but there's a hole in the trunk of the tree that she can climb in and out of. And they're saying that the hollow inside of the tree, this is whoever is writing this saw it. The hollow inside of the tree is about 5 feet in diameter, meaning is if you're taking a central point inside of it and you make a complete circle around you, at any distance is 5 feet away from that central location. It's about 5 feet in diameter, it's 5 feet around, and the hollow itself is about 3.5 feet in diameter. So we can get an idea of how big or how small these living quarters were, but that was more than enough. And if she escaped from slavery, like I'm proposing, she could go in here, put something over the hole, some trees, some brush, and she could just hide out inside of here. Look what they say. The opening through which Aunt Dorcas makes ingress and egress, goes in and out, is about 18 inches wide and 4 feet high. So that's a 4 feet high and a 1.5 foot wide entrance into this area that's 5 feet by 3.5 feet. The tree is on the edge of a swamp near a dense cane brake where few people ever go. So now we're getting more facts that we can look into. We know that she's in Georgia. We know that she's in Bibb County. Now we know that she's inside of a tree. We know the size of a tree. We know that the tree is near a swamp, and the swamp is near a dense cane brake. Let me find one more piece of information before I move on. It may be further down. Maybe further down. So I think I'm just gonna get into it, and we'll see that later. So I'm gonna show you guys something. Right? Look. So these are possible locations of where Aunt Dorcas was at. Remember, we already showed you the map of where Georgia is on the map, where Bibb County is on the map. Now, later in the narrative, they're going to tell us that she's near Reed's Station, Reed Station. Look at that. Reed's primary substation. And they're going to say that she's next to a swamp. The tree is close to a swamp next to Reed's Station. So we see in this area of Bibb County, we have Reed's primary substation, and we have Ray's Swamp right next to it. So the chances that she's right here next to Ray's Swamp are very, very good. Very, very good. We are most likely looking at the area where this Hoodoo Priestess actually lived, inside of a tree, right? The swamps, they're still there. Okay. Now get this. This is a hollowed out oak tree, white oak tree in Georgia. Now I got this picture not to say that this is the tree that she lived in, but to give you a visual of what the tree that she lived in possibly looked like. So when they talking about a hollowed out tree, now this tree is still alive, but if you notice, there's this like entrance hole. Now remember, the entrance that they said that she went in and out, it was 4 feet high, 18 inches wide. It's very, very similar to what you're seeing on your screen. And so she could go into this hollowed out tree trunk, 5 by 3.5 inches in diameter, and this is her living quarters where she can hide out. Because remember, we're saying that she quite possibly escaped during the time of slavery, ran into the swamps, and lived in a hollowed out tree like this, not only until after the end of the Civil War, but until she passed away. So we can see that even if in your mind you're thinking, nobody can live in a hollowed out tree. Yes, they can. Nobody can live in a hollowed out tree that's still alive. Yes, they can. If you go out into the woods and into a swamp, etc., you will see a lot of things like this. Maybe not a lot, but several. They're there. Look, I found an image of one. So this is the type of habitat or housing that the Hoodoo Priestess, Aunt Dorcas, lived in. Now, if you remember from the story, look what it says. Look what it says. The tree is on the edge of a swamp near a dense cane brake where few people ever go. So we see where she's at. We see the swamp that she's probably next to. We see what the tree possibly looked like. And so we know that the tree and the swamp is near a dense cane brake. What is a cane brake? Let me show you that, because I want you to be able to picture all of this in your mind. Okay? Now, a cane brake is the perfect place to hide, especially if you escape from a plantation, because there is a lot of growth, there's a lot of high shrubbery, and it's a place where not many people go because it's hard to navigate through without cutting it all down. And so if Aunt Dorcas, like we're assuming, escaped, she would want to go to a place where she could easily hide. And when she came out to hunt for food, when she came out at night, she could move around without easily being seen, because there's no roads and there's not a lot of people around there. Look what a cane brake is. A cane brake is a thicket of any of a variety of arundinera grasses. As a bamboo, these giant grasses grow in thickets up to 24 feet tall. A gigante is generally found in stream valleys and ravines throughout the southeastern United States. Where is Georgia? Southeastern United States. A tecta is a smaller stature species found on the Atlantic and Gulf coastal plains. Finally, a Appalachian is found in more upland areas at the southern end of the Appalachian Mountains. Cane does not do well on sites that meet wetland classifications. Instead, cane breaks are characteristic of moist, lowland, floodplain areas that are not as saturated as true wetlands. Cane breaks were formerly widespread in the southern United States. Georgia is the southern United States, potentially covering 10 million acres. The presence of cane breaks signaled to Native Americans and to early European settlers that an area was fertile and ecologically rich. So, in Georgia, these cane breaks would have existed near this swamp, and they were very, very difficult to navigate through. And sometimes these bamboo shoots, these canes, these overgrowths could grow up to be a good 24 feet high. Perfect for someone who escaped from the plantation and is hiding. So we see that Aunt Dorcas escaped from a plantation. She ran off into the swamps. Hold on. She escaped from the plantation somewhere in this area, wherever she was from. She ran off towards this raised swamp. She found a tree there that was hollowed out. She made her home inside of this tree, and she was protected and hidden by the swamp, by the tree, and by the cane brake that surrounded her. And she was able to go undetected until the end of the Civil War and even after. So you can see in your mind's eye where this hoodoo priestess was living and why. Look, the few people who have talked to Aunt Dorcas say that she sleeps in the daytime and roams the swamp in cane breaks at night. Another clue that she's been doing this since the time of slavery. Because when one escaped and they were hiding, they never came out during the daytime because it was easy for them to be spotted and captured and taken back to the plantation. So their routine, anyone who escaped and lived in the woods, lived in the forest, lived in the swamps, their routine was exactly this: sleep during the daytime, roam at night to find food and tools and clothes and things of that nature. Anything that you want to do foraging, you want to do that at night because it's hard to be caught. That she sleeps in a sitting posture on a bed of rags that has been in constant use long before the war, when some of the people now living in the neighborhood first knew her. So, bam, now we have a direct statement that tells us she escaped from slavery. She's been there since before the war. The war that they're referring to is the Civil War. This is written in 1894. They're saying that she sleeps in a sitting posture on a bed of rags that's put inside of the hollow of a tree. And they say that this bed has been in constant use long before the war. The war ended in 1865. Long before that, and she was born in 1814. She could have escaped at 15. She could have escaped at 20. She could have escaped at age 30 and been there long before the war. And they say when some of the people now living in the neighborhood first knew her, so some of the people in the neighborhood can confirm that she has been in this tree since prior to the end of the Civil War. Proof positive, she was a runaway. Aunt Dorcas' only occupation is making conjure bags and nostrums for the Negroes. What these conjure bags and nostrums are made of, No one has ever been able to find out, but they are supposed to be made of roots and herbs. Let's stop right there. So now we're getting into why am I calling her a hoodoo priestess? Well, they are saying that her only occupation, the only thing she does to make any kind of money, she makes conjure bags and she makes nostrums. If she's making conjure bags, she's a practitioner of hoodoo. 1,000%. So let's look at this. But the nostrum, many of you are familiar with a conjure bag. We're going to go into that. But let's deal with the nostrum first, because that's probably a word that you never heard. You probably don't know what a nostrum is and why she would be making it. Well, the fact that the newspaper is saying that she made nostrums and that was her occupation, that she made nostrum for the Negroes, that means she was their doctor, she was their healer, she made their medicine. And again, all of those things are intimately related to hoodoo. But the actual definition of nostrum is important to realize and understand. The actual definition is a medicine of secret composition recommended by its preparer, but usually without scientific proof of its effectiveness. A usually questionable remedy or scheme. Now, they're going to include those things in the definition and the word that they use because they want to discredit hoodoo. They want to discredit natural herbs and natural remedies, right? But in a world when you couldn't go to the store and buy Tylenol, you couldn't go to CVS and buy ibuprofen, you couldn't go to the doctor and get a prescription for muscle relaxer. What did you do when you get sick? What did you do when you got hurt? What did our ancestors do when they stubbed their toe, when they had a runny nose, when they had a headache, when they had a sore throat? What did they do? They went to the hoodoo priestess or the hoodoo doctor, the medicine man. And this individual would use herbs, they would use roots, they would use animal parts to create a medicinal formula that was meant to heal the person who was suffering from the illness. So the fact that they use the word nostrum, they're trying to be slick and make it seem like, okay, so she gave people medicine, but there was no scientific proof that the medicine she gave them actually worked. All right, we hear your hate, but it proves to us that they went to her for their medicine. Proof positive, again, that she was a hoodoo priestess. Now, I want to show you guys something. Remember, she's in Georgia, right? Now, all over the South, this was normal. This was normal. The practitioner of hoodoo healed thousands and thousands and thousands of our people. They tended to the medical needs of thousands and thousands of our people. These two excerpts are taken from the Georgia slave narratives. Individuals who was actually enslaved in Georgia, the same state that Aunt Dorcas is in. Look what they say. Look at the top. Look at the top quote. When the slaves got sick, they had doctors and used old herbs. Jerusalem ore was a kind of herb for children to build them up. And there was field grass roots and herb roots, which was boiled, and tea drunk for fevers, and primer rind tea, which was drunk too. Sometimes they would hang garlic around small boys' and girls' necks to keep away any kind of sickness. So where do you get roots from? Where do you get herbs from? Where do you get plants from? This stuff grows from the ground. So Aunt Dorcas Aunt Dorcas, what she would do is in the nighttime in the swamp, she would go around the swamp looking for certain types of animals, looking for certain types of plants, looking for certain types of roots, looking for certain types of bark, looking for certain types of herbs. And she would bring these things back to her home inside of the tree, and she would make what they call magic potions, what they call nostrum. But she would make medicine. She would make her Tylenol. She would make her ibuprofen. She would make her muscle relaxers. You understand? She would make her poultices. She would make her salves. She would make her teas, her herbal remedies from the stuff that she found growing from the land. Because that's what the hoodoo priestess and the hoodoo doctor did. Look at this other quote. Oh, the peoples didn't never worry about no doctor then. They couldn't go to the doctor like we go to now. They doctor was in the field at that time, at that day and time. The doctor was in the field. Your medicine was in the field. There was no CVS. There was no Walgreens, especially for our enslaved ancestors to go to. You couldn't go on Amazon and order something. You couldn't order something from Canada. You just order it and have it delivered to your house. Your child won't stop crying. You don't know what's wrong with them, so you Google WebMD. You read through WebMD what might be wrong with them. You get in the car, you run down to CVS. You get in the car, you run down to Walmart. You get in the car, you run down to Walgreens. You find something on the shelves, you buy it, you bring it back. Get out of 2025. That wasn't available. It wasn't available. The only thing that you could use to heal yourself was the things that grew naturally. That's why it frustrates me sometimes when people try to act like hoodoo is all hocus pocus and magic and spells and conjure. Yes, that was a part of it. But there's a real world part of it as well. Doctors. The person that practiced hoodoo was doctors. They were nurses. They healed people, not just praying over them, not just laying hands on them. No, they made actual medicine. Any medicine on planet Earth is made from something that they dug out the ground, they got off a tree, they got off a plant, they got from an animal. All medicine. You get bit by a snake, a lot of times the anti-venom is the venom of the snake mixed with other stuff. Period. They take stuff that they get from the earth to heal you. That's the science of it. That's the science. Look, I'm going to tell you just like I know it. All the older peoples used to get their herbs out the old fields for their remedies. My master and my missus was the ones what doctor mostly in them times. Used to get old field ringdom, what smelled like this here mint, and boil that and let it steep. That what was good to sweat a fever and cold out you. So you get a fever and cold, these are roots you need. Then there was life everlasting tea that was good for a bad cold. And cherry bark, what would make the blood so bitter, no fever never couldn't stand it. So you know, another remedy for fever, you get some cherry bark, make a tea out of it, boil it in water, make a tea. Them what had the rheumatism had to take that lion's tongue, or what some people's call wintergreen tea, and some of the time they take pine top and mix with the herbs to make a complete cure. Oh, they make it bad as they could so as to weaken the case. Another thing that been good for the rheumatism was that red oak bark that they used to bathe the limbs with. Willow tea was something good for chill and fever, and catnip and sage tea was the thing for babies. So even rheumatism or arthritis, they had remedies for that. You know, all of these remedies were made with things that an individual found out the ground. And it's right here in Georgia where Aunt Dorcas is at. These are hoodoo practitioners. So when they tell her that she her occupation was making nostrum, They're telling us that she was a doctor. They're telling us that she was a healer in a slightly disrespectful way, but that's what they're saying. But then again, they say that she also made conjure bags, right? Now, what were the conjure bags of Aunt Dorcas? What were the conjure bags? Look at this article. It gives us some of the ingredients in the quote-unquote conjure bags. Look what they say. Now, when they talk about a conjure bag, basically what they're saying is she would get several ingredients, put them inside of a cloth, a napkin, a cut piece of a shirt, or whatever the cloth is, put it inside of a cloth, tie it up, and this mixture of ingredients, accompanied with the words of power that she may say over it, when given to an individual, is said to have power, either the power to heal them, either the power to bring them good luck, either the power to bring bad luck on someone that you use it on, or to even use this conjure bag to control the spirit realm. Remember, I told you in hoodoo, it's a lot of it is dealing with spirits. Now, it's a lot of it is dealing with spirits that have never been human, but is also dealing with the spirits of deceased humans, like the ancestors, great grandma, great great grandpa, great 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 grandma, grandpa, or even an ancestor who was a hoodoo practitioner who passed away. If you could get the graveyard dirt or a bone, even if it was a small bone, like a finger bone of someone who practiced hoodoo, if you could get that and make a conjure bag out of it, then you were in essence able to harness the power associated with that ancestor. And if you got the right ingredients and said the right words, you could communicate with the spirit realm and get the spirits to work on your behalf. Look how it says some curious ingredients. We're going to look at some of the curious ingredients of these conjure bags to know what Aunt Dorcas was actually making. It says, the instrument used, whether bag, bottle, or box. So we're talking about a conjure bag, but you could put these things inside of a box. You could put them inside of a bottle. It's actually the mixture of ingredients and the words that you use that gives it the power. The instrument used, whether bag, bottle, or box, contains a supply of curious ingredients, such as a pinch of red dirt taken from the grave of some ancestor who was a noted conjure doctor in his or her day, a small piece of burnt rod, an inch or more long, known as the conjure rod, a stick of silkweed, and a bit of Samson's snake root. In addition to these, a very clever practitioner often has a hawk's foot, a toad's eye, and a lizard's tongue. When once the instrument of devilment is placed for a person, it is bad luck to move it before the spell has fallen on the right one. The hoodoo doctor can give any person power to use the instrument provided the jack is satisfied. Okay, so we see that various ingredients can go into the conjure bag. And graveyard dirt, the bones of an ancestor, various roots, various herbs, and various parts of various animals. A different combination of things based on the results that you were trying to get. But this idea of a conjure bag that Aunt Dorcas was using, where does it come from? Why is it a part of hoodoo? Well, it's a part of hoodoo because this was brought directly from Africa. There is something in Africa called the Minkisi. Minkisi. Now, these Minkisis were found in Central Africa in the Congo. And they were also found on plantations, southern plantations in the United States. They're also called mojo bags, showing a direct irrefutable archaeological evidence and proof that these spiritual practices were brought from Africa over here, and the practices continue. But what do they say about the Menkisi and the Mojo bag? In West Central Africa, the Congo and Yoruba people created medicine bags using leather or cloth and placed feathers, animal parts, roots, herbs, and other ingredients for protection. So in West Africa, they took pieces of cloth, they put feathers, animal parts, roots, herbs, and other ingredients inside of this cloth, and they used it for protection. The exact same practice that we're reading in Hoodoo. When Yoruba and Bakongo people were enslaved in the United States, the practice of using feathers, animal parts, animal and human bones, remember you can get the bones of an ancestor, and other ingredients to create mojo bags continued in African American communities in the tradition of Hoodoo. Boom. In West Central Africa, people wear Nkisi Wanga and other charm bags to ward from and reverse evil and to cure illness. In West Africa, these conjure bags are called juju. The word juju is used in the Africa diaspora to describe all forms of charm made in Hoodoo. Africa diaspora religions and African traditional religions. I'm pretty sure all of you have heard people talk about, oh, bad juju. You putting bad juju on an individual. Oh, that's bad juju. Now, you may not know where it comes from, but that's a holdover from West Africa. The African ideals about charm bags influenced the creation of mojo bags and the spiritual philosophical practice in African American communities. Mojo bags can be hung from trees, tied to a string, worn underneath the clothes to cause an effect on the target. The exact same practice that we see in the United States. So a conjure bag is a Menkisi. A conjure bag is a mojo bag. A conjure bag is juju. You see, it's the exact same thing. They just did it in Africa and then they did it over here. Now I want to zoom in on this. Look at this. That last sentence. Look, it says archaeologists in New York discovered continued West Central African burial practices in a section of Lower Manhattan, New York City, which is now the location of the African Burial Ground National Monument. Historians and archaeologists found Congo-related artifacts at the African burial ground, such as Menkisi and Nkisi conjure bundles buried with African remains. These Nkisi and Menkisi bundles became the conjure bags in Hoodoo. I'm going to say it again. The Nkisi and Menkisi bundles became the conjure bags in Hoodoo. So if someone is talking about a conjure bag, they are literally talking about the Menkisi, the Nkisi, the mojo bags of West Africa. It is the exact same thing. And so much so that when our ancestors were over here, the burial practice that they used, even if on the outward they converted to Christianity, they still buried their loved ones according to their ancestral African practices. And they buried them with Menkisis and Nkisis, mojo bags, conjure bags. Those are different names for the exact same thing. Exact same thing. And so why would they do that? They would do that for several reasons. One, because they were practicing their form of spirituality and they wanted to ensure that they got into the heavenly realm and the afterlife. They wanted to protect their spirits as they passed on from negative influences and negative spirits. And they wanted to protect them and give them. It's just like if someone you die loves today, You know, you may if you're a Christian, you may want to put a cross in the tomb with them, because you feel like you feel a connection with the cross, because you relate the cross to your Christian faith. It's all about faith, religion, spirituality. This is what they did. So the conjure bag, again, is a Minkisi, it is a Ninkisi, it is a mojo bag, and it is juju, and it's directly from the continent of Africa. And these things were used for protection and medicine. So it's also the same things as nostrum, right? So look, let's get back to the story. So just so the story will make more sense. So let's read that again. Aunt Dorcas' only occupation is making conjure bags and nostrums for the Negroes. What these conjure bags and nostrums are made of, no one has ever been able to find out, but they are supposed to be made of roots and herbs. The Negroes have great faith in Aunt Dorcas' conjure bags and medicines and buy them liberally. They regard her with the greatest superstition, however, and believe she has only to say one word to put a spell on them that is 1,000 times worse than death. When they approach her, it is with the greatest difference, and no queen ever held more complete and undivided control over her subjects than Aunt Dorcas holds over the Negroes in the lower part of Bibb County. And I want you guys to think about something. She's the Hoodoo Priestess. She's the Hoodoo Queen. She has her subjects, people that come to her. They come to her for her conjure bags. They come to her for her medicines. They come to her for advice. They come for her to put spells on individuals. And nobody plays no games with her. They respect her. Whatever she wants, she get. So an individual, the unlearned, will look and say, oh man, she's just somebody that escaped from slavery. She's living in a hollowed out tree. She's wearing rags. You know, she's sleeping on a bed made of rags. She's eating forest creatures. She's eating lizards and snakes and things like that. They're going to look at that outward appearance and think that she's less than. But the actual power that she wields among people is the status of royalty. It is the status of royalty. See, we have been trained to focus on the wrong things. You know, oh, if your outfit doesn't cost $5,000, you get no respect. If you don't have a necklace on that costs $10,000, you get no respect. If you bought your shoes from Walmart and you didn't order the latest J's, you get no respect, right? If your glasses are broken and you don't have $500 pair of glasses, you get no respect. The material possessions, people start to look at the material possessions as opposed to the heart of the individual and the influence of the individual on the people that are around them. And they started relating that to your worth. How much material possessions you have makes you a more worthy human being. But that's wrong. It's how much you do for others. Only what you do for others will last. Nothing else will last. When you're dead, you could be a millionaire and die. And when you're dead and gone, your millions mean nothing. But if you have a good name, if you've treated everybody right, and you helped other people to succeed in life, your good name will live on after you die. And your good name will still keep you held in high regard where your $1 million won't do it. So this Hoodoo priestess, Aunt Dorcas, who lived in a tree, was richer and was as rich and as powerful as a queen, a real live queen. Maybe she didn't have 1 million subjects, but there's no amount of subjects that you have to be considered royalty. You understand what I'm saying? The minds of the people have to be, we need a good brainwashing. We need our brains washed, and we need real information put back in. Look, when they approach, I'm gonna read that again. When they approach her, it is with the greatest difference, and no queen ever held more complete and undivided control over her subjects than Aunt Dorcas holds over the Negroes in the lower part of Bibb County, the lady that live in a damn tree. You need to let that sink in. You let that sink in. Pause the video and let that sink in. Because if you don't get that, I'm not doing my job. They believe that she can hoodoo them no matter where they are, and that she can read their very thoughts. Telepathy is real big in hoodoo. It will be impossible to get one of them to tell her a lie, as they believe she would by some magic power with which she is supposed to be gifted, strike them dead in their tracks, or put a spell on them by which they would die a lingering death and suffer the tortures of the damned. Now, that sounds crazy, right? That, they think that, if they lie to her, she's going to know that they lied, and they may drop dead and they may be punished. So what I hate sometimes is that people get into religious wars and they pit one religion against the other. So what I like to do, since I'm a student of religion, I study all religions. I know a lot more than I say I know. If you really just listen to me, you'll figure it out, and you'll be like, you know what? I'm Pooh, Matthew Daniels, the real bookworm, the greatest author alive. That guy has a lot of information that he only talks about when it's necessary, because I listen twice as much as I speak. But I want to refer you guys to a story in the Bible. In the book of Acts, when the church was first being formed, the new members of the church, and even the old members of the church, they shared everything in common. When someone would join the church, how the Bible tells it, they would bring all of their possessions and give it to the apostles, give it to the disciples, give it to the people that were teaching them the faith. And they would take their goods and they would divvy it out equally among the community, and everything was shared equally. And so there was a man and a woman who came into the faith, joined the church, and they sold some property. And I don't remember the exact price, but I'm going to make up a number so this will make sense. They sold the property for a certain price. Let's say they sold it for $1,000. And then when they came to the apostles, they only presented the apostles with $500. And they lied and said that this $500 was what they sold it for. And the Holy Spirit let the apostles know that they were lying. And because of their lie, the apostle, I believe it was Peter, said that you didn't lie to me, you lied to the Holy Spirit. And because of that, you must suffer. And the man and the woman dropped dead. So to my Christian brothers and sisters, let's not similarities in ideas. A man and a woman can sell a property, lie about how much they sold the property to the apostles. The apostles can be given the information that this is a lie through some supernatural means, and then they will be punished for lying. Now let's read this. It would be impossible to get one of them to tell her a lie, as they believe she would, by some magic power with which she is supposed to be gifted, strike them dead in their tracks, or put a spell on them by which they would die a lingering death and suffer the tortures of the damned. you know what? I'm going to go pull up that story in the Bible. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to show it to you. Because sometimes, seeing is believing. Everybody doesn't know the Bible how I know the Bible, right? They haven't read it as much as me. Okay, they haven't read it as much as me. So y'all give me just a second. I'm going to BibleGateway.com. I'm going to pull up that story and we're going to look at it. I'm going to show you. Okay, I got it. Didn't take me long to find. Did not take me long to find. Let me get that screen share up. I'm going to show you guys, because if y'all like, oh, that sounds crazy, that they would think that about the Hoodoo Priestess. Okay, well, if it's crazy, I'm not religious gangbanging, but if it sounds crazy, it sounds crazy to everybody. It's crazy to everybody. Everybody sounds crazy with it. I'm fine with that. Let us all sound crazy together. So this is in the book of Acts, chapter 5, and we're going to start with verse 1. Right here. Look. But a certain man named Ananias and Sapphira, his wife, sold a possession. So a man and his wife sell a possession and kept back part of the price. His wife also being privy to it, and brought a certain part and laid it at the apostles' feet. So a husband and wife, Ananias and Sapphira, they sold a possession. They kept some of the money for themselves, and they brought a certain portion of it to the apostles and laid it at the apostles' feet. Now look at what the apostle Peter said. Verse 3. But Peter said, Ananias, why had Satan filled thine heart to lie to the Holy Ghost and to keep back part of the price of the land? While it remained, was it not thine own? And after it was sold, was it not in thine own power? Why hast thou conceived this thing in thine heart? Thou hast not lied unto me, but unto God. And Ananias, hearing these words, fell down and gave up the ghost. That's dying. He dead. Gave up the ghost means you die. And great fear came on all them that heard these things. And the young men arose, wound him up, and carried him out and buried him. And it was about the space of 3 hours after, when his wife, not knowing what was done, came in. And Peter answered unto her, Tell me, whether ye sold the land for so much. He gave her a chance to tell the truth, but she lied. And she said, Yea, for so much. Then Peter said unto her, How is it that ye have agreed together to tempt the Spirit of the Lord? Behold, the feet of them which have buried thy husband are at the door, and shall carry thee out. Then she fell down straightway at his feet, and yielded up the ghost. And the young men came in and found her dead, and carrying her forth, buried her by her husband. And great fear came upon all the church and upon as many as heard these things. So they sold their property and they decided to lie about it. And it was the lie that killed them. Because Peter told them, when you had the house, while you had the possession, not necessarily a house, while you had the possession, it was yours. Even after you sold it, all of the money was yours. But you conceived in your heart to come to me, the apostle, and lie about how much you sold it for, and that you're giving all of it unto the church. And so Peter said, you didn't lie to me, you lied to God. And so Ananias died. His wife came 3 hours later. He gave her a chance. hey, did you really sell it for $500? She said, yes. Peter like, damn, I already know you really sold it for $1,000, but since you're sticking to the lie, bam, she died too. So the lie ended both their lives basically because they wanted to lie, right? So we're going to look at this again and see the similarities. Okay, look, it would be impossible to get one of them to tell her a lie. Nobody wanted to tell her a lie. Just like in the Bible, how it said, great fear came on everyone. And everyone was like, we don't want to lie to Peter and the apostles because we just saw what happened to Ananias and his wife. It will be impossible to get one of them to tell her a lie, as they believe she would, by some magic power with which she is supposed to be gifted, strike them dead in their tracks, or put a spell on them by which they would die a lingering death and suffer the tortures of the damned. It's as if they saw this happen before. And that's powerful. That's powerful. Look, whenever a Negro in the neighborhood dies suddenly or is afflicted with a loathsome disease, they believe Aunt Dorcas has put her spell on him or her and go to her to get absolution. What is absolution? Absolved to whatever they did, whatever they think they did wrong, to get her to put that spell on, make it right. Oh, it sounds like superstition. It sounds crazy. It sounds like magic. But again, I'm not battling with different religions, but I want to show that you believe the same stuff with your religion, with your spiritual practice. An individual feel like they can go and confess their sins to the priest. They feel like they can confess their sins, they can repent and get absolved of their sins in the blood of Jesus, because there is a liaison between man and that spirit realm. Yes, man can go directly to that spirit realm by praying in the Christian religion, but there's always a pastor, there's always a preacher, there's always a priest. In Islam, there's always an imam. In Judaism, there's always a rabbi. In any human organization, religious or not, I don't care what you say, there's a hierarchy. There's somebody over the doggone flock. Now, even though the flock is taught that the flock can go directly to the spirit realm on their own, speak to God and the spirits on their own, in the real world, there's imams, priests, there's rabbis, there's bishops, there's pastors, there's cardinals, there's preachers, there's overseers that individuals go to and pray for me. I grew up in the church. Many a time I've gone up to be prayed for. Let's not pretend. So going to the hoodoo doctor, the hoodoo priestess, the hoodoo queen, the hoodoo practitioner is no different than going to the priest, the pastor, the imam, the rabbi. It's no different. Don't let them demonize everything that your ancestors did, everything that your ancestors left for you. Don't we have to stop letting them demonize what our ancestors brought to the world, because we demonize what our ancestors gave to the world, but we say that everything out the individuals that are not our ancestors gave to the world is holy, it's pure, it's righteous, it's good. No, you're the devil worshiper, they're righteous. We got to stop believing that. By paying her a small price, they are supposed to become immune, I guess that word is hard to say. These are old newspaper copies that have been Xeroxed or photocopied or scanned into a computer, supposed to become immune for a stated period And when the time of immunity expires, those who fail to renew are avoided by those who do, as though the Negro failing to renew his or her immunity was afflicted with I guess that's Asiatic cholera or the smallpox. Now, don't get turned off by what they say about paying her a small price, because every time you go to church, they pass the offering plate. They pass the offering plate. Ancient Israel, you brought, if you want to go to the priest for that forgiveness of them sins, you bring the dove. You bring a lamb, you bring the first fruits, you're bringing something. And the priest in ancient Israel, they lived off the donations of the people. The imams live off the donations of the people. The rabbis live off the donations of the people. Yeah, they may have jobs and stuff like that, but you get what I'm saying. The preacher, the pastor, they take donations from the people. So don't tell me that because this hoodoo priestess accepted a wage for her conjure bags and her medicines and whatnot, that makes it fake if you're giving 10% to the Lord's church. It's all the same. It's just a different religion. It's a different spiritual tradition. The only difference is hoodoo it's not codified. There's not a book that you can pass around. There's not a set list or a set book, a certain rules that we all go by that everybody passes around. And I may have to write that. Maybe that's why I was born. Because I am a scribe, I am a historian, I am a griot. Maybe I'm supposed to write the book so that moving forward it can be codified in future generations. But anyway, few of them fall, however, and in this manner, Aunt Dorcas takes in a good many dimes and nickels. What she does with this money, no one has ever been able to learn. And the general belief is that she has a large sum, either in the tree or buried close by, as she was never known to spend a cent or to leave the neighborhood. So she was getting in all of this money, but think about it. She was making money. Remember, in the headlines. Remember the headlines. This is how you know it's real. Look, said to have large savings. The talk about how much money she had was so great that they put it in the headline. Said to have large savings. And so they're telling us in the article that she made a lot of money doing this. But she still lived in a tree. She still wore rags. She still slept on a bed of rags. She still ate lizards and snakes and insects. Think about that. She made so much money to where she could have bought a house. She could have bought a bed. She could have bought a couch. She could have bought a safe. She could have lived off the hog. She could have been T.D. Jakes. She could have been Joel Osteen. But she still lived in poverty. Even with the money. So what did she do with the money? Did she give the money to the needy? Did she donate the money? Did she bury the money? Nobody knows because Aunt Dorcas never said. But we know that she didn't use the money to buy fancy clothes. She didn't use the money to buy fancy jewelry. She didn't even use the money to buy a house because she lived in a tree until the day of her death. Humble. Humility. Is disgusting if you call her a devil worshiper. You understand? Look, as far as the Negroes are concerned, this money is perfectly safe, as there is not a Negro who ever heard of Aunt Dorcas who could be persuaded to touch 1 cent of her money for fear of being stricken down while in the act. So nobody was going to rob her. Nobody was going to steal it. High morals, high moral standard they follow in Mayat. Perhaps the strangest thing about Aunt Dorcas is her diet, which consists principally of snakes, grasshoppers, worms, and bugs of all kinds, lizards, and in fact, nearly every kind of species of reptile or insect. She has never been known to eat any kind of fresh or salt meat, nor was she ever known to eat bread. Her substitute for bread is sweet potatoes and la hominy, that's like a bean, I believe, that are given in exchange for the conjure bags and nostrums when the Negroes do not have the ready cash, as Aunt Doris does not do a credit business. So you have to pay for the stuff up front. If you don't have money, you give her food. Now, again, I believe that her diet alludes to the fact that she was a runaway. Because if she escaped from the plantation and she was hiding out in that tree in the swamps, she has to eat what's available to her. Now, what's available to her is what's in the swamp. What can she catch? She can catch snakes. She can catch grasshoppers. She can catch worms. She can catch bugs. She can catch lizards. And she obviously has a knowledge of plants, roots, and herbs. So, of course, she's going to eat that too. But those animals that she's eating is because she was a runaway. In my opinion, it's because she was a runaway. That became such a staple of her diet while she was hiding out in the woods as a runaway from the plantation prior to the Civil War, that she just continued on with that diet until her death. But also, remember, as a part of hoodoo, is certain parts of these particular animals, lizards, snakes, reptiles, insects, that are used in hoodoo. So she would most likely use every part of the animal. She would eat some of the animal. Maybe she would save the tongue. Maybe she would save the eye. Maybe she would save the skin. Maybe she would save the bones and use it as part of the conjure bags or the medicine that she would make. I recall reading a story about one conjure doctor. It was a man, and he kept a dried out lizard skin on his body, and that kept him from being beaten by the overseer. But remember, when we looked at some of the ingredients, the curious ingredients to what a conjure bag could entail, look what it says. In addition to these, the roots and graveyard dirt, in addition to these, a very clever practitioner often has a hawk's foot, a toad's eye, and a lizard's tongue. And I've read some instances where cat parts, cat bones were also used in hoodoo. So that was probably her diet. That was the things that she was eating, but also she was probably using that in her hoodoo. On Dorcas says that there are very few snakes that are poisonous, and that if people could once be induced to try them, they would be regarded as great delicacies. People eat snakes to this day. Lizards, too, she says, are very fine, but as she is getting very old now, she finds it's hard to catch them. Grasshoppers, however, are her favorite dish, and she even smacks her lips when speaking of them. In the wintertime, her supply of reptiles and insects are very limited, and she is often compelled to live for weeks on sweet potatoes and la hominy, which root, I can't read that word, something, acorns, and beech nuts occasionally, something. Her method of preparing the reptiles and insects for eating is to stew much as snakes and lizards, but grasshoppers and butterflies are eaten raw. Oh, her method of preparing the reptiles and insects for eating is to stew such as snakes and reptiles, so she cooks the snakes and reptiles. But grasshoppers and butterflies are eaten raw, so she eat those raw. Aunt Dorcas' bent form and enfeebled condition indicates that she will not be here many more winters, even if she survives this one. And no doubt her death would be a great relief to the Negroes who know her, as they live in constant dread of her, not knowing when by thought or act they might incur her displeasure and have a spell put on them. Now, yes, they may have been in fear of her, but also they saw her as the holy one that they went to. They spent money with her. That's how she got rich. So they weren't just afraid of her, they needed her. She was the one that provided their medicine. She was the one that provided their conjure bags. So she was a staple in the community. She was a leader in the community. She was honored. She was respected. She was revered, and she was loved. Her money, if she has any, will probably never, or if found, will perhaps not amount to nearly so much as supposed. Now, they just saying that because they probably want to steal her money after she dies. That's probably all that's about. They just want to steal her money. So I appreciate you guys tapping in. This has been the story of the Hoodoo Priestess who lived in a tree since the time of slavery. Ancestor Aunt Dorcas, born circa 1814. I hope this sheds some more light on hoodoo. I hope this sheds some more light on our ancestors. And, you know, as always, I hope I said some things that you guys have never heard before. I want to thank you guys for tuning in. I want to thank you guys for supporting the channel. I want to thank everybody for all of the cash apps that they send. I want to thank you for liking the videos. I want to thank you for sharing the videos. It is all greatly appreciated. So the Hoodoo Priestess who lived in a tree, this is your brother Matthew Daniels, aka Ampu, aka the Chosen Few, aka the Real Bookworm. I'm not just a bookworm world. I am the real bookworm. Make sure you get it right. And as always, may your name live on forever, and may your memory never die. Hotel, I'm out. Love you guys.